Good afternoon. It's that time again on a Friday. Welcome to a really pleasant Pittsburgh today. Sun is shining. There's no wind. It's balmy, pleasant, warm, but not too warm for our mysterious 7-part 4 I see here, because I can read Latin numerals. Overcoming the Monster, which has no reference to your presenter. It's just the title of the piece. I hope you're out there. I hope you're enjoying it. And do say hi if you're joining us. And Madeline, always an early joiner. A bewitching number. 7. Yes. Funny thing about 7, as to why 7 is considered mystical and magical. We might investigate that. Although it is the only number between 1 and 9. Well, it's a perfect number. It's a prime number. They call it the unassailable number. Shelley, hello. It is. I'm glad it's a beautiful day in Mount Lebanon, other side of the city, because it's a gorgeous day here. And hello from James in White Oak. Be safe yourself. I wish that on every single one of us. Greg. Yes. Yes, indeed, Greg. You take those words right out of my heart. We are... especially on the eve of 9/11, and it's 20 years, and still that thought is there with all of us. The waste of life, the stupidity, the foolishness behind all of that. I was just talking with my esteemed colleague Catherine. You know, the two dates I think that everybody who was alive will always remember: what were you doing when you heard about 9/11 and when you heard about the assassination of Kennedy. And they sort of stick in the brain because of both of them, the enormity of both of them, but particularly 9/11. And let us never forget. Grace, hello. Mild and breezy evening in Dublin. Very pleasant. Seems to be the weather's nice everywhere at the moment. There's Robert from Shadyside. Any chance of a future lecture on Albie? Yes, indeed. I am a big, passionate fan of Albie, particularly Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and also Delicate Balance, which I think is almost a perfect Greek tragedy. So, yeah, I will have a talk about Albie in the coming weeks. He's been on my list for some time. I have to get around to it. So I promise you, within the next few weeks, I will do a talk on Albie. Yes. Hello, James in Crafton, always there, good and regular. Nice to see you there. Fitz Jamie is there. I believe you have a house guest. I hear these things. Debbie, hello. People are flying in, which is really good. And I have my coffee as usual. So all is safe because I have my coffee. There are very few things important in the world, but coffee is one of them. I'm an addict. Yes, as usual, we say thank you to the Allegheny Foundation for their remarkably generous sponsorship of this year's series of webinars. And here's hoping that they will continue that support for next year's series of webinars, because we plan to be here every Friday free of charge to give you some new insights into theatre. And I'm going to be having more guests coming up in future programs. They always seem to be popular when we have other voices coming in, and we've had a lot of very positive response to the webinar we did on Native American theatre, and we plan to have more of that as well in the not too distant future. And although we've now announced our season, we will be having another announcement, I think, on the 1st of October, which will be our plan for the Expand the Canon series, which is the series of stage play readings that we plan to do over the course of the next season. And we've got some really very exciting pieces that we want to read for you. Some funny, some not, but they are all remarkable pieces and dealing with those areas that we really want to expand the definition of a classic into, which includes more plays about women, more plays by women, more plays about and by people of color, and particularly about Native American, which is an underserved facet of theatre. And LGBTQ, of course. So if you want to help us do that, coincidentally, you can make a donation. If you go to the website, www.pictheatre.org, note that there are 2 T's in there. We're still on the warpath, as it were, for our $100,000 summer appeal. It's good, it's great, but we're not there yet. So please, please, please consider sending anything you can. Every donation helps, especially if you find that, at the end of the week, you have $5 in your pocket you haven't spent, send it to us. If you find at the end of every week you have $5 you haven't spent, you can send that too. But every dollar you send, every individual donation, no matter how small, no matter how large, that money goes to the presentation of theatre. And aside from the 3 major productions we're doing, these play readings will be free of charge. There will be limited seating for them, but we are going to present those free of charge because this is an opportunity for us to expand not simply our own canon, but the canon of plays that you may be interested in, that may attract you, that you may be able to discover because you may never have known about this kind of material. So that's the purpose of this exercise. 6 plays, beautifully read and staged, and your donations will help. You can now, because our subscriptions are now on sale, you can buy a subscription for the 21-22 20th anniversary magnificent season. You can do that by going to there's the season, As You Like It, Endgame, Boys in the Band, and the Expand the Canon series. If you are a season ticket holder, you get priority when it comes to the free seats for the Expand the Canon series. It's a remarkably economic cost to your wallet. Prices, we are trying to keep the prices low, keep them down. We've held the prices at the same, I think, for the last 3 years. You'll find it's incredibly good value for money for the highest quality theatre that you could possibly imagine. So do consider a subscription. The other piece of news is this weekend is the Irish Festival here in Pittsburgh, and we are there. You can search through the tents and find us, and you can buy a subscription there. And we have goodies on sale, or T-shirts and various other things. And for those of you who remember it, Pict presented a musical version of James Joyce's The Dead some years back. And we still have some CDs of that, which are on sale at an incredibly reasonable price. So it's worth dropping down to the Irish Festival anyway, because it's the Irish Festival, and you'll see lots of wonderful stuff of Irish and Irish ilk, but come and find us as well. So that's all my announcements. It's 5 past. The latecomers should be here by now. There's Catherine from a gorgeous day in Glenshaw. And there's Dennis, as ever. Loyal Dennis there from Greensburg, and Ken, hello. And for those of you who aren't live but are watching this later on, who aren't watching it yet but will be, hello to you, and thanks for checking us out on the YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Right. So let's take a look at today's topic. And as I say, we're coming back to those 7 basic plots. As I always say on this one, it is a debate. Are there 7 basic plots? Are there 3 basic plots? Is there 1 basic plot? Are there 25 basic plots? I think the clue is in the word basic. There are a multitude of plots of books, plays, novels, movies, whatever. But the argument that is presented that there are actually 7 basic plot structures, how a story is told and around what particular theme. So that's what we've been discussing. And today we're going to discuss a plot line which we are calling Killing the Monster, or How to Kill the Beast. And this basic plot, I think, although it's number 4 on my list, it's possibly number 1 on the general list of what the basic plots are. This particular plot line probably precedes just about all others. Now, as I said in the preamble that you get sent to you, from the very early legends, very early storytellings, you have George and his famous dragon, all the way down to the world of Marvel Comics and Thanos and his plan to cleanse the galaxy of life. We're always fascinated, intrigued by this idea of monsters. A monster, it's one can be monstrous, which usually means being very, very large, but a monster is a very difficult thing to define, and yet every one of us knows what it means. It's very strange. One of those words that has universal understanding and terribly difficult, precise definition. And most of us, sometime in our childhood, have been convinced that one of these creatures resided either under the bed or in the closet. So from our very earliest awareness, our earliest consciousness of the world around us, we always had in our imagination this notion. And we also began to have this idea that if such a thing existed, we could destroy it. We could be a hero. That's what this week's webinar is about. So, according to the book, which I've had to buy twice, because again, it's one of those books somebody said, "Oh, can I borrow that?" about 15 years ago in Dublin, and I have never seen it since. So I had to buy a new copy of it. It is what I consider the Bible on the 7 basic plots. The argument is proposed that the discovery of the ancient city of Nineveh also produced a different discovery, what was probably the library of that city. Some cuneiform tablets that were discovered in the Victorian period, and it took something like 20 years to work out and translate them. But when they were translated, they revealed what is probably the first great expression in literature of the kill the monster plot line, and that is the story of Gilgamesh. It's basically become the plot line of most adventures concerning killing the monster that have been written or told ever since. And the story, the fundamental theme is there is a monster threatening the world. Isn't it always? Because of this. This particular monster's name was Humbaba, and it lived at a great distance away, buried away from sight in a deep, dark forest, and he is considered invulnerable and invincible. Our hero, Gilgamesh, is given special weapons by an armorer, and he sets off to kill the beast. And after much struggle and ups and downs and heaving and toing and froing and being in danger and getting out of danger, he succeeds in his task, kills the monster, saves the world, and returns home a hero. Now, as a basic fundamental plot, and being possibly the earliest that we have any record of, and I'm assuming that there were tales told well before that, but Gilgamesh is our very first written, structured version of the plot to kill the monster. Now, why do I think this is the ultimate basic plot? About 5,000 years later, a writer of adventure stories of a kind, and indeed a very famous children's book with a not dissimilar plot, which I'll come to later, wrote about a different kind of monster. Not this strange, weird beast in the forest, but a human, a monster, who lived a great distance away, underground, buried deep on an island, and who threatened the world. And a hero was given special weapons to fight him. The hero's name in this case was not Gilgamesh, but James Bond. And he was given special weapons by an armorer, Q, and he sets out to kill the beast. And he goes through difficulties and ups and downs, and he's under threat, and he survives, and he succeeds in his task, kills the beast, saves the world, and comes home a hero. It is the same story. The story of Gilgamesh and the story of James Bond and Dr. No are basically the same story. Not simply the same guidance plotline, but all the things that happen are almost mirrors. Now, this notion of the monster, as I say, starts when we're very young. We've all, as I said, in our childhood, we've feared the monster under the bed, or the monkey in the closet, or something strange down in the cellar or the basement or out in the barn. We've all had that fear as a child of there is something out there that wants to get us, something out there of which we are frightened, something of which there may be no evidence whatsoever other than our own imaginings. But those imaginings are real. The imaginary monster is real enough in there, and it frightens us. And when those monsters appear, who is the hero? Assuming that we ourselves at that age are not heroes and we just want to hide under the bed covers. Who will defend this us from this dreadful monster and keep us safe from harm? Well, usually the hero at that point is mum or dad, who will come in and say, it's okay, I've got rid of it, or it's okay, I've checked, it's gone away, or okay. But that fear of the unknown monster with strange supernatural powers can only be defeated by a hero in whom we trust, in whom we have faith. And so from a very early age, that hero usually is one, either or both of our parents. That theme continues, and I'll come in a moment to why I think that theme is universal. But that theme is there in most of the very early stories that we're told or have read to us. They all concern this very topic, the topic of monsters and the heroes who kill them. And usually, by the way, this is pretty bloodthirsty. Nobody ever teaches a monster to lead a better life, or go to a convent or a monastery, or go back to school and learn how to be decent. Usually the solution of dealing with a monster is to kill it. And there is one of them in just about every fairy tale. And we are told these fairy tales, by the way. The reason, and you know, the great classic fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm that were written down, they wrote down variations on stories that had been told to children for generations, embellished, reworked, restructured, rethemed, but the basic plot line was always the same, and it was cautionary. All of these are cautionary. They're advice given at an age when we can understand the simplicity of the message. And the message is a very, very ancient message, and it is in 4 words. Watch out for monsters. One of the earliest things we teach our children, no matter what that particular topic is, whether it's strange people on the streets or their own imagination of strange things under the bed, watch out for monsters. For instance, let's take one of the great classics, Little Red Riding Hood, sweet little thing, trolling away through the woods to bring something nice to her grandma. She is duty-bound to visit her grandma because it is her grandma and she is but a child. And like all good children, she must go and visit the grandma in the deep, dark forest, where she is set upon by the big, bad wolf. Now, just take note of the description of that character, the big, bad wolf. And the big bad wolf, who appears in other stories, such as The 3 Little Pigs, and who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Well, we all should be, which is the moral of the tale. But we'll head back to Little Red Riding Hood. When all seems lost, when she meets the wolf, Wolf disappears, Wolf goes on ahead, she arrives at the cottage, she opens the door, she goes in, and what appears to be her grandmother in the bed, but Red Riding Hood notices something is not quite right. It's got big ears, it's got big teeth, it's going to eat you. When all seems lost, and Little Red Riding Hood, trapped in that cottage with the monster, who is about to do dreadful things, and has already done dreadful things, because grandmother is inside the wolf, Little Red Riding Hood is rescued by a hero. The forester, the woodcutter, call him whatever you will. But this hero arrives in the nick of time, hearing the cries for help, comes in, chops off the wolf's head, splits him open, and out comes grandma. The hero saves the day. The monster is destroyed, and all is well. And it's not just important that Little Red Riding Hood is safe, but that his other victims are saved as well, which is grandma. Very fundamental story, but it's saying to you, watch out for monsters. Just because you meet somebody in the woods who's polite, just because you walk in and it looks like grandma, watch out for monsters. And this is a fundamental tale we teach our children. If you look at another one, slight variation on it, but it's still fundamentally the same. There's young Jack, who very foolishly sells a cow for a handful of beans. His mother, somewhat annoyed, throws the beans out through the window, and the next morning they have produced a giant beanstalk, up which Jack climbs, and what does he find at the top of the beanstalk? A monster, a giant who has collected everything and keeps everything prisoner, and in one variation of the story has the goose that lays the golden eggs and the beautiful golden harp that are there not because they want to be, but because the monster keeps them there for his own satisfaction. Jack, not being quite pure, liberates these things from the monster. So the monster is angry. The monster starts to follow Jack down the beanstalk with every intention of destroying Jack's home, the world. Jack drops down the beanstalk, chops the beanstalk down with his little axe, and kills the monster. Jack is now a hero, at least in his mother's eyes, but it's the same fundamental plot. The world is Jack's house. The people are Jack's mother, and the creatures he has liberated. The monster is the giant. Jack is the classic hero. So what is a monster? And as I said, we all know what it is, but we would all be hard-pressed to actually describe one. And yet they've affected literature down the ages since Gilgamesh was first composed, and I say it again, over 5,000 years ago. A couple of thousand, maybe 2,500 years before Sophocles wrote his plays. This story is incredibly ancient. Every generation has sort of redefined the monster or found a new way of looking at it. Homer, for instance, when Odysseus is making this wonderful journey home in the Odyssey and comes across all sorts of situations, at one point there are the Cyclops, these one-eyed monsters who want to prevent him from escaping, and he kills one of them. He rescues his crew. The world, the ship, is the world in which he lives. He rescues it. He saves the world by killing the monster. But that's in literature. In classic mythology, there are others. For instance, most of us know the story of Perseus and Medusa. Medusa was, there is a princess to be saved. She is threatened. Perseus must get the head of Medusa as a mechanism for saving the heroine. Medusa is a monster in that, apart from the fact that she's got a head full of snakes, if you look at her, if she looks at you directly, you turn to stone. So this is again a monster with a single purpose, a monster that is almost invincible, because how do you kill her without looking at her? And of course, being the legend of the hero, he discovers that by looking in his burnished shield at her reflection, he can kill her without looking at her. It's the same story. Oedipus, even Oedipus manages to kill a monster, or at least dispose of a monster. The purpose of the monster, the Sphinx, is to destroy man. Any man who fails to answer the Sphinx's question. Oedipus uses intelligence, uses his wits. His weapons are his intelligence, and defeats the Sphinx by answering her question. Theseus and the Minotaur. The Minotaur is one of my favorite monsters. This creature with a human body but the head of a bull, who lives in the center of this labyrinth. In order to gain the hand of the princess, he must destroy the Minotaur. He uses both intelligence and weaponry to do that. Girl on one end of a big ball of string, which he unwinds as he goes through the labyrinth so he can find his way back out, into the middle, finds the Minotaur. Usually people have got lost and died of hunger before they get there. Finds the Minotaur, kills the monster, follows the string back. He's a hero. He has saved the world, namely the princess. Same story. When you look into the Bible, for instance, there is a hero and monster that we all remember. Everybody at some point in their life has experienced, be it with an insurance company, medical bills, anything that you sort of think, I can't deal with this, it's too big for me to handle. It's a David and Goliath moment. And Goliath is a classic example of the monster. Somebody who cannot be defeated. He is so big, so strong, so powerful that nobody can stand against him. If anybody goes up to fight him, they die. He'll just step on them or crush them or do anything. I always have an image of him, something like, for those of you who've watched Game of Thrones, he's like, to my mind, he's something like 3 times the size of the Hound. But this notion of David and Goliath is a perfect example of this simple plot. This incredible monster, undefeatable, defeated by a hero who uses his wits rather than physical strength. The idea of, I'm not going to go over there and fight you because you'll kill me. But if I stand here with a slingshot, I can get you. That is a classic example of hero and monster, very much in the realm, very much following that same fundamental theme that Gilgamesh gives us. European literature and European legend. Beowulf is a perfect example, yet again, of the invincible monster that can be defeated by the hero prepared to take the risk. A monster whose single sole obsession is kill everybody and eat them, and a hero whose single obsession is to be a hero. I can do this. We have a derivative of the Perseus and Theseus stories. We have the story of George and the Dragon, which the Christians adopted as a symbol of Christianity. And indeed, the English adopted as their patron saint, although he was, I think, Turkish or something. But George fighting the dragon, Perseus and Medusa, Theseus and the Minotaur, it's fundamentally the same story. When you move even closer to ourselves, you look at the advent of Gothic horror, the Victorian period. There is Baron Frankenstein, who creates his own monster. Realizing what he's done, tries to destroy it, and is destroyed in the process. It's a variation on the theme, but there is no question that it isn't fundamentally that same pattern repeating itself yet again. A distant cousin of Oscar Wilde, a man called Sebastian Maturin, came up with another variation on that theme in a very remarkable tale called Melmoth the Wanderer, which has an incredibly complex plot. I'm not even going to try and break down, but I do recommend you read it if you haven't ever read it and you're into Victorian Gothic horror. It's a terrific one. Of course, there is the ultimate Gothic monster, the one that really sort of defines that sense of Gothic horror and the tale of hero and monster. And that is the inimitable Count Dracula. Bram Stoker created this glorious monster, built it out of legends, the legends of vampires throughout Europe that go back again, probably to the dawn of civilization and beyond. But took this and turned it into the perfect monster whose single objective was to survive. He must kill to survive. He must take blood to survive. That is all he can do. I mean, he can enjoy himself in the process, but it's that fundamental, he will destroy anything and everything to survive. And then you have the hero. And the hero of this is not Van Helsing. The hero of this is Jonathan Harker, who was the first victim that we know about in the Dracula story. He was the one first attacked. He was the one who nearly died. But with a purity in his heart, his love for his fiancée, his sense of decency and purity, he gains weapons from an armorer, Van Helsing. You might also equate Jonathan Harker to James Bond and to Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, what am I saying? But by using that sense of purity, that sense of purpose, that sense of decency, with the weapons provided by Van Helsing, which are both physical and intellectual, Jonathan Harker kills the monster, or the monster is killed because of him as a direct result. It's the same story. To stretch the point, you might even consider King Kong as a monster. King Kong, who lives on an island, in a forest, on the top of a mountain, and who wants only one thing, which is provided by the local occupants of the island, which is live meat in the person of usually a woman, because women are always victims. Suddenly there's Fay Ray on the island with him, captures her. The monster finds her irresistible, but the heroes must rescue her, and rescue her they do. But the monster, taking the monster in the process and putting the monster on display, because there's nothing we like more than seeing a monster chained up and unable to do anything, except the monster escapes, takes the girl and climbs up the Empire State Building, and all the planes fly around and shoot him, and he's dead. In this case, the hero, one might say, is more esoteric, because we must always remember the last line of the movie, which says it was beauty that killed the beast. And in that sense, beauty is a representation of purity. The monster is interpreted as evil. The monster is interpreted as selfish, obsessed, ugly, and beauty killed the beast. Beauty is a sense of purity. Even in modern literature and cinema, we've had many a monster and hero, quite aside from James Bond and Dr. No. The Marvel and DC Comics franchises have produced a whole realm of monsters and heroes that can trace themselves back 5,000 years to Gilgamesh. Look at Batman and Joker, a perfect embodiment of hero and monster. Joker isn't just a villain, he's a monster, because his purpose is utterly selfish. He's not like a crook who robs a bank and takes the money and goes to live in Cancun on his ill-gotten gains. He is a monster in the sense that he takes pleasure and joy in destruction. Superman and Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor isn't simply a bank robber. Lex Luthor takes joy in causing and inflicting terrors, horrors, awful things. I'm going to come to that in a moment, Greg. So you can follow that same principle back. The various and remarkable and very strangely equipped heroes of the Marvel world and their battle against evil forces. They've all been armored, as it were, with various weapons, from Rocket Man to all the others. I can't remember them. And they set out to battle monsters, best exemplified by Thanos, and his single-minded objective. But the story doesn't change. The story is the same with all of them. The only thing that changes is the appearance of the monster. So, is there a commonality in all of these very strange creatures that need to be defeated? What is it that makes monsters into monsters? What is it that makes us define them as monsters? How do we recognize them? Because they all seem strangely familiar, and they all seem equally frightening. What is it about it? Generally speaking, sort of rule of thumb for a monster, if you were going to build a monster that we have to defeat. They are ugly, they are misshaped, they are terrifying to behold. H.G. Wells did a perfect job on that with War of the Worlds. The monsters were the Martians, and good old planet Earth defeated them. The hero was planet Earth and common microbes. But the monsters from Mars were ugly, bloodthirsty. They are also treacherous. You can never trust them. They are vicious, and they are also vile and depraved. There is no nobility within them. Arguable with King Kong, but I did say that might be an exception. Monsters are very often not easily apparent to the eye. Sometimes they are shadows. They're sinister, they're shapeless, demonic. And most importantly, going back to the original point, they are nightmarish. They are something of nightmare. And it's that nightmarish aspect that should teach us all that these monsters relate back to an incredibly primal fear that we all experience. We all have that fear of the unknown, that fear of the dark, that fear of the mysterious, the sinister. And that fear may be, and I'm no expert on this because everything I tell you may be wrong, but that fear may be the result of a genetic memory. For instance, I don't know if you ever go camping under the stars, but if you do, you're just carrying out a practice that's gone back to the dawn of time. As our very distant ancestors sat in their caves or under the trees or whatever they used as, whatever little spot they called home, they feared those things in the night making strange noises, creatures with glowing eyes, creatures howling out in the dark. Natural fear, a human fear. Creatures that were circling, threatening, waiting to devour anyone who ventured beyond the safety of the precious firelight, in the woods, threatening to eat you up, big bad wolf. And where only the very bravest of the brave might take up a burning branch from the fire and venture into the darkness to kill the threatening monster and return a hero. You see, it is fundamental. The story is so fundamental, so simple and constant. It doesn't change. Only the names, only the clothing, only the additional circumstances change, but that basic plot is still there, and it's been there since we sat in caves around a blazing fire, protecting ourselves from those things we feared but could not actually see. Story never changes, always the same. Only the appearance of the characters and the technology they use seems different. So the man in the cave with the burning branch is no different really from James Bond and whatever technical wizardry Q has given him. It's the same simple plot. Almost by default, the monster is just another, as the song says, creature of the night. Now, very often the monster will take on an animal form, which is another reflection on that primeval fear of that our ancestral cave dwellers had, that we tend to, when we cannot fully describe something, we give it an identity of something that we fear anyway. Everybody's afraid of wolves. I don't know why, they're wonderful creatures. Bears, lions, tigers. There's another song. But we will identify a monster in a shape that we can logically find fear in. Now, the most intrinsically important aspect of killing a monster as a plot line, as a concept, is that we always want to perceive that monster is somehow different and lesser than ourselves. Hence, that we will identify it in an animal form or in a grotesque form. Because the monster is always opposite to our perception of what is good, our perception of what it is to be humane, to be human, to be a hero. The monster is always a threat to our conventional understanding of human goodness. Monsters are intrinsically bad. Heroes are intrinsically good. And that gives us a kind of a satisfaction, a kind of security in ourselves and in our intentions. Now, to do that, you actually have to take a look at what is the difference between intrinsically bad and intrinsically good. And that is always subjective. How do we create monsters? Through our imagination. Every civilization, at some point in their evolution, considered badness to be associated with, identified with, defined by imperfection as they saw it. In other words, the fear of the different, the fear of the simple-minded, the fear of deformity. I come to that one as well in a moment, Dennis, good point. The fear of deformity, the fear of the ugly, the fear of a difference of color, of shape, or anything that is different to you. So, in earlier times, the disabled, the mentally unstable, even albinos or people of color in a white society would be shunned and rejected by that society in which they were unfortunate enough to belong. The fact that you were different gave the possibility that you were a monster. So when bad things happened, you can do one of two things. You can investigate it, or you can attribute it to a monster. Such societies built mythologies and entire folklores around such misfortunes, and created rules, created disciplines in order to purge themselves of the threat of such people. Hence, as Bram Stoker clearly defined in Dracula, the mythology of the vampire. I hope nobody with any degree of intelligence actually thinks vampires exist. But because people could fall sick, people could get blood diseases, people all sorts of strange things, the myth of the vampire satisfied that need for there to be a monster to eradicate. the early Christian church, and in fact other religions, would question the true humanity of anybody who was afflicted out of the normal. People who were physically disabled, people who were mentally disabled, people who did not live by the usual set of rules and standards of accepted goodness were considered badness. And in the very best of heroic traditions, because they were thought of as monsters, the heroes would dispose of them, usually by killing them, burning them, drowning them, doing anything else to them. And this is all tied into that simple plot. It's a human frailty. It excites us and it terrifies us. We don't like it and we love it because it creates an excitement and because it creates a kind of satisfaction. If good has been done, if the result of establishing the identity of a monster, chasing the monster, and defeating the monster works, then the net result is we feel great. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples of what I mean by that, but I will just add this point. The hero is always pure in this context. The hero is always defined by loyalty, decency, and selflessness. Perfect definition for James Bond. And this is how, with our human frailty, we want to see ourselves as heroes. We want to be the hero. We love to identify with it. Nobody goes to a hero action movie that doesn't come out saying, God, I would have done that. We need to identify that because we're terrified of monsters. Monsters really frighten us. We want to be able to believe that we ourselves can overcome them. Now, as I just said, the monster sometimes is a bit difficult to define, because if you look at that list I gave you of how society treated people who were different, let's take a look at a movie like Predator. There's Sylvester Stallone chasing this hideous monster through the jungle. Is it a monster? Or is it just, in its own mind, a hero trying to survive? Who is the monster? Where is the monster? That's a philosophical discussion. But the argument is true on both sides. That's what fascinates me about that idea, that both of them are heroes and both of them are monsters. The story, the plot line remains true, whichever way you look at it. But the important point about a monster, and I've sort of said this before, the monster will usually have sort of a single objective, tunnel vision. In other words, this is a generalization, but the monster will only have one objective in mind. Red Riding Hood's wolf wants nothing more than to eat people. That's all it wants to do, eat people. Doesn't want to do anything else, doesn't want to torture them, doesn't want to have conversation with them. It just wants, there's a person, I will eat it. Thanos only wants power to get all those magic stones so that he can reduce the world's population regardless of its consequences. It is a single-minded tunnel vision. All monsters can be defeated by a hero who can see the bigger picture. So a hero cannot be tunnel visioned. A hero has to look at things from a multi-perspective. Because if it, you've got one vision, one tunnel, imagine two trains going into it, bang, crash. The hero has to be able to see the way over the hill, not through the tunnel. If he fails to do that, he fails to be a hero. And in the very best of stories, the hero wins not just by force of arms, but also by the use of intellect and intelligence to outwit as well as to outfight. And in fact, if you cannot outfight a monster, you must outwit the monster. Perseus outwitted the Gorgon, not by facing her, but by looking at a reflection of her, using his intelligence. I cannot look at her, but I can look at her reflection. So the tunnel vision objective of the monster, which was stare at your enemy and they turn to stone, and it works pretty well because most of your enemies are stupid and they stare back at you. But you come across a hero who has wit and intelligence as well, who says, here's a solution, bang, you're dead. And that applies to so many of those stories. The use of an intelligent approach to the problem is what makes the hero even more heroic. It's dead easy to go up and bang swords off one another, but to work out another way, that's what makes the hero the hero. If you look at in a war situation, soldiers fighting impossible odds and overcoming the enemy in order to save the world, or at least their world. That's that same point. If you were to take a look at, yes, indeed, Ken, you're absolutely right. Dickens uses this. I mean, I could go on at length about the number of writers who follow this basic theme. But the fact is, what I want to talk about is it's a basic theme. Go out and read the books, go out and look at the plays, go out and watch the movies. You'll find that same theme being repeated. Every war story is based on that. Every war story is based on I mean, if you look at that wonderful series, Band of Brothers, every week there was a monster. That monster could have been an army, it could have been a platoon, it could have been a sniper, it could have been whatever. But in fact, in Kubrick's wonderful Full Metal Jacket, you have perfect examples of hero and monster. And one of the monsters in that, and of course we all know about the training sergeant, but in the latter part of the movie there is a sniper, and he's got to be stopped, and that is the monster, and heroes have to deal with it and use their intelligence to do it. Something similar happens in Saving Private Ryan. The monster is that whole tank unit coming into the town, and the hero are each and every one of those soldiers finding a way to fight that monster, not by confronting it, but by using intelligence, by using subterfuge, by using different methodology to defeat that monster as it comes. Same story. Westerns are full of it. The Magnificent Seven, and its somewhat better precursor, the Seven Samurai, a group of 7 fighters facing a monster, attacking the world. Except the monster are bandits, the world is a small town or village, and they are the heroes because they have to not simply fight in a confrontational way, but to outwit, to conquer. Science fiction. Let's be honest. Captain Picard and his crew seem to find monsters to destroy in every episode, and always they are set up against that which appears to be an impossible dilemma. But they have been given the weapons and they have the intelligence to be able to conquer those monsters. Now, there are other kinds of monsters. What about the Christian concept of fighting Satan? Yes, Satan was set up, I believe, by the church as a kind of definition of a monster and an evil. Now, of course, it doesn't say that in the Bible, but the church decided to establish that. Satan is established as a monster figure. Our real understanding of it as we get it today comes much more from Paradise Lost than it does from the Bible. But that notion is always that there is this monster, and that by purity and decency and honesty and using the tools and the weapons that are given to you, you can defeat that particular monster. The same is true, for instance, in Pilgrim's Progress. But there are, as we're saying, there are other kinds of monster. And this is what we all get now. And the argument is put forward in a film from, I don't know, when was it made? 70s, something like that, called Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman. Perfect example of a monster that we can all understand now, because it's a movie about a virus that threatens all life as we know it. A virus that we must fight against and can only be defeated by a vaccine. Now, anybody who doesn't get that one these days really hasn't been out a lot lately. The virus is the monster that can destroy us all. The hero is the vaccine. The hero destroys the monster. The vaccine destroys the virus. And the weapons that the vaccine has are the scientists who work together to create this weapon that is the vaccine, that is the hero that destroys the monster. It's the same plot. Even moving forward from that movie where the vaccine was created in hours rather than months, we have some people would argue that there is a different monster today. You may disagree with me, perfectly entitled, but I'm entitled to my opinion too, and it's my webinar. Today, I would describe the virus certainly as the monster, but I would describe the vaccine as the hero and the anti-vaxxers as the cohorts of the monster, because they help the monster to spread. Yes, life is always unfair, Greg. I totally agree with you. What can you do about it? Now, I've got in a limited amount of time. Anyway, the whole point is this plot line, this concept of killing the monster is utterly universal. And of all the plot lines, and we'll be discussing more, over the next few weeks. I've still got 3 to go. Of all the plot lines, this one is, I think, the most fundamental, because I do believe it's the one that goes back most into our ancestral our ancestral past, tautology. We have understood this notion of fear of the other, fear of that we cannot describe, that we cannot understand, into which we create the monster. And as I said at the beginning, everybody knows what a monster is, and it's very difficult to describe a monster because it is something that we fear in here. And when writers, when filmmakers, when actors even really want to frighten us, they put forward a proposition of something that we know we are afraid of and cannot understand. And the worst kind of monster is the one you cannot describe, the one that is unseen, the one that rests in your imagination. They're the ones that frighten us most. I want to finish on one other thing. I mentioned earlier a children's story. The plot line is very simple. There is a hero, and there is a villain, and there is a weapon. And the hero is called Karaticus Potts, and he has been equipped by himself with a very, very special weapon, a motor car that flies. And there is a villain, a monster, very funny one, but he's a monster called Baron Bombburst. And there is a world to be saved, and the world to be saved are children. And Karaticus Potts, using the weapon, goes and faces the villain, destroys the villain, and rescues the children, saving the world. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was written by the same man who wrote Dr. No and James Bond. Karaticus Potts is James Bond. It is the same basic plot as Dr. No. And if you disagree with that, I'm sorry, but that's my thesis. And as you read books, as you watch movies, as you watch plays with that in mind, and try to define for yourself, where is the monster, where is the hero, what are the weapons, and how does the hero, with the weapons, outwit the monster? I think you will find in so much more literature than you would expect that same fundamental plotline exists. As Ken said there in his chat line, Charles Dickens did it all the time. There are monsters and heroes in such books as Great Expectations, as Nicholas Nickleby particularly. These are exactly that same storyline. Anyway, that's it. I'd love to hear your opinions. If you have any, I hope you do, please send me an email, and I will try to respond to you as soon as I can. But there you have, part 4 of the Mysterious 7, Overcoming the Monster. I hope that you all overcome the monsters in your life. I hope you're not still afraid of what's under the bed. Questions, comments, email marketing@pittheatre.org. Thank you again to the Allegheny Foundation. Next week, I'm going to be talking about some Shakespeare, I think. I've got 2 or 3 things that I'm preparing notes on. Not sure yet, but you'll be getting an email about it anyway, and it'll be up on the social media. My favorite monster on stage, good heavens, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. Because there are so many that one might consider. Personally, actually, one of my favorite monsters on stage in that sense is from Dickens. And because of that damn musical, everybody's turned him into a jolly old thing. But to my mind, Fagin is one of the greatest monsters that Charles Dickens ever wrote in Oliver Twist. He's a perfect example of the monster, the thing we should fear. Charles Maturin. I've got the spelling here somewhere. I said Sebastian, but that's the name of the character. Sebastian Melmoth. Maturin. I've got to look through my notes to find out how you spell that. I think it's Matchurin. But the book is called Melmoth the Wanderer, and you shouldn't have too much difficulty getting it. It is published in paperback. Maturin. Yeah, there you are. Charles Maturin. That's it for now. Thank you all for being with me. I hope you have a wonderful week. Hope you have a nice weekend. Let's take a moment tomorrow all to remember what happened 20 years ago. And I will see you next time. Take care. Bye.